single bird that is heard, card is generated, and they act somewhat like a trading card, like a battling card from like Pokemon or something like that. What is wonderful / completely insane, I think there's 6,254 species in BirdNET. For every species, essentially we have to figure out statistics for every species. We can have a little look at the latest, I don't want to say latest and greatest iteration of Birdydex. If you did not see my video the other week, go check my channel. It was a bit of a deeper overview of this tool I've been looking around with making that tracks the birds that are in your garden via their calls, i.e. their song. Go look at the previous video because that goes more into detail. I'm not going to go over it again. But yeah, you get this log of the birds that have been heard in and around your garden. You can say whether you've seen them or not, etc, etc. The reason I want to check in is because I've made some additions. I said last time that I wanted to make some changes to the stats screen, which I've done. You get the top species that have been heard in your garden, the detections per day, so you can see if it's gone up and down, the activity, i.e. when have they been heard. There's also the monthly activity, which is basically saying how many recordings has been. So if you ever have like a battery outage or whatever, you'll be able to see like a dip, because obviously if you set your recorder on like a schedule to do like 2 minutes every hour, then it's going to be a consistent amount over time, but you'll see a dip in this chart. So it's quite good to be like, oh, something's up. This here is the new species per month, which is a chart which what it does is it shows you how many new species per month have been recorded. But at first, this isn't that great at the moment because obviously I've only been running it a month, but I think over time it'll be quite interesting to say, yes, this first block's going to be obviously a big one, but you might see little peaks and troughs of, oh right, there's some new species heard, and that's then what makes you go, you have a little look here and you go, oh, right, hang on, what's being heard? So say for example, the European goldfinch has been heard 17 times in my garden, yet I haven't seen it. So these peepers, they are peeled to spy the European goldfinch. I'm not convinced there's been a grey heron in my garden, but I will keep an eye out. But anyway, that's the updated stat screen. Now, the real reason I want to do a video is, I think I mentioned on Instagram last week, ideas are free, but the ability to take ideas far too far is definitely a gift. And it's definitely a gift I have, because you'll notice here there's a little EX button. Now, if you watched the video the other week where I was talking about where the idea came from this, and the name obviously as well, Birdydex, it's a bit of a play on Pokemon and the Pokédex, the idea of, you know, building up a collection of birds that you heard in your garden, etc. However, I took it too far. So I have continued to work on this in possibly the stupidest way possible, but I have hidden the stupidity behind this EX button. So if what you're interested in is audio recordings of the birds in and around your garden, so you can have some sort of idea of what's going on in your garden, if you like listening and you like spotting the birds, Birdydex does what Birdydex do. However, if you are insane, you can press this EX button and you'll notice that rainbow flash. Let's do it again just for fun. It's so extra. But you will also notice when you click the EX button, 2 new items appear on the top bar, and that is collection and battle. Yes, I know. Now, what I've essentially done here is I've leaned fully into the trading card and Pokemon TCG aspects of the birds and the Pokédex, as well, the Birdydex. So what we have here is essentially in the standard version of Birdydex, each of these cards is basically saying, yes, we have heard this species. For example, the Eurasian magpie has been heard 82 times in my garden, but it is 1 card per species. What happens in the collection is for every single bird that is heard, a card is generated, and they act somewhat like a trading card, somewhat like a battling card from like Pokemon or something like that. What is wonderful / completely insane is I had to effectively, I think there's 6,254, something like that, species in BirdNET, which is what we use for the identification in this. For every species, essentially we have to figure out statistics for every species, because what I want is every card to be unique. So you could hear 100 European goldfinches, for example, but generally the cards would be unique to each other, but they would be unique based around a central statistical point that defines what a European goldfinch is. So there is an element of randomness to when a card is given to you for a bird. And the way that this has been done is every species has 7 statistics. It's the same 7 statistics across all species. And they are stupid statistics because they have to be somewhat randomly generated. And I didn't want to do things like beak size and talon length because they're too literal. And I don't know the details of 6,000 odd species, but I can make stupid assumptions about species based on behavior and size and mating behavior and calling. And what that means is we can generate a baseline middle set of statistics for every species. These are just sentences that just should not be said out live on the internet. We can generate for every species a central set of baseline statistics. These baseline statistics are in these categories because it'd be better if I just explain them first. So first you have acoustic aggression. This is the absolute loudness and harshness of this species. So how loud is the little devil? 0 to 100, all these stats, by the way. Feeder audacity is how bold they are at the feeder. Are they, a bit of a bully at the feeder? Bob factor. This is how much of a blob is said bird. Is it a round, fluffy, bowling ball of a bird? So say for example here it says that, I forgot when I wrote these. How perfectly spherical, fluffy and aerodynamically disastrous the bird appears. High bob is a defensive stat. Now, hold that sentence with a little bit of thing because we don't really know. I haven't really defined what a defensive stat is yet, but these birds are impossible to take seriously. A swift scores 5, whereas a puffed up robin is a near perfect sphere with a 90+ score. Yeah? Dawn chorus nuisance. How early, how loud. Simple. Guano payload, that kind of goes without, I don't need to explain that, but a Canada goose scores a 98, a car destroying, pavement ruining, statue dissolving output. Suburban elusiveness. So this was the one that I had 6 and I wanted 7 for some reason, and I did this one late. What I want is the cards to effectively reward rarity, but rarity that's not just how rare the bird is. So what you have to assume is that if people were going to use Birdydex and install the audio listener in the garden, generally they're going to be in relatively suburban areas. Just because that tends to be where people's houses are when they have gardens. So what this is a statistic about how rare this species is seen in suburban areas. So if it is seen in suburban areas, if you get it on your recorder, it's quite likely to have quite a high suburban elusiveness score. What these scores do, we're not at that yet. And by I say we're not at that yet, I mean I'm also not at that yet. But, we make this up as we go along. And also this is a way of, if you are somebody who doesn't live in a place that has lots of birds, that means you're probably quite likely to also get birds which are more suburbanly elusive. So you'll get a bit of a boost there on these ones. That's the theory. Basically, I wanted something to reward non-standard garden birds. And then the last one is infidelity index, and that is how naughty is said bird. Does it pair up for life or does it just go at it in the bushes? That is a score. And basically, all of these scores add together to give you a power level for that card. So the power level is set by base statistic of the bird, and then there is a percentage likelihood when the card is generated at detection that it will be given a rarity ranking. And that rarity ranking defines how big of a positive or negative range these stats can be in and around the original base statistics. So every bird has a core personality that defines its statistics, and then it also has, at generation, a likelihood of these statistics moving either way a certain amount defined by its rarity. Right, and that has been said. That information is now out there. Now, ignore my CSS. It's a bit bust on these cards. These here are shiny cards, and shiny cards in the grand heritage of trading cards and Pokemon cards are the greatest of cards until the advent of the holo, but we shall stick to shinies for now. Essentially, shiny is another step above on the rarity, so you get another little boost for shiny, but shinies are very, very rare. So say for example, I here have pulled a shiny carrion crow, but it is an uncommon, so it hasn't really got that much in the way of great stat editing, but it is a shiny. And there's only one thing we love more than numbers go up, and that is shiny numbers go up. So I added shinies in. Now we can go into here and look at the ranks. There is ultra rares, rares, uncommons, commons, and then shiny, which is a modification on top of they're rare. So as you can see here, I've got shiny ultra rare. Now, shinies get their little hollow on here, but they also go, if they're ultra rare shiny, they then get this frame, which modifies as well. Now, as I say, that CSS there needs some work. It's a lot. That's not a shiny, that's a blindy. So essentially, what's happening here is we are turning the great, sensible tool of audio recording birds to build up a picture for your bird watching and listing needs, and we are then piggybacking off it the stupidest excuse for a trading card game ever. I mean, who doesn't love a 236 power common Gadwall? Well, nobody, because it's a common and it's get in the bin. But what I quickly realized was I love this as a concept for making you feel like, oh, you know, I'm going to check in because part of the workflow is you basically, if you watch the first video, you know that you open these packs and that's what identifies the recordings. Opening the packs is basically just processing the audio recordings. But what ends up happening here, so say for example 82 times the Eurasian magpie has been heard in my garden. Now that's great, but after a period of time you'd start to see a lot of the same birds, and it's quite exciting when you're like, whoa, I've got a new one. So say the Eurasian bullfinch was heard, which, can we just take a moment? What a boy the Eurasian bullfinch is. You would not want that accidentally flying into your face at full pelt, because that looks like a baseball with a beak. So essentially you would have those little bits where you go, oh, right, okay, that's a new one. But you might go days where you're like, oh, it's not really anything new. It's just more of this, more of that. And I still find that interesting, but I wanted something that gamified it a little bit in terms of, all right, so I've heard a magpie again, but whoa, it was a shiny magpie. So it gives you, there's worth to repeat hearings of birds, worth doing a lot of heavy lifting there, but I like it. Now, what I did then realize was, say for example, if we go back to this and it was this bird has been, the magpie has been heard 82 times, well, that equates to 82 cards, 82 Eurasian magpie cards. Now, that meant you ended up with a lot of cards that were of no, you know, just repeat cards. So leveraging the long and illustrious history of mobile games and things like that, where you can essentially feed cards to cards, I added this here, which is known as the Mulcher. And yes, it is. It's a horrendous name for something that is in fact feeding birds into it. So I could pick up this grey heron and feed it into the Mulcher. Oh, I'm not going to do that because that's the only, see, that's a nice warning there. If I do that, I know that would be the last I would have of that species. So I essentially would be making that species extinct in my deck. We don't want that. Let's just actually go to the carrion crow. So if we drag the carrion crow into there, it's been mulched. That's it, it's gone, it's deleted. But it has been added to this number. And you'll notice here 6 out of 100. So I've mulched, that is a wonderful word to say. I've mulched 66 carrion crows. I've done the same to 44 Eurasian magpies. Now, so ultimately, the mulching means that you have a reason, there is value associated with a bird that is repeatedly heard, and there is a way of cleaning out your deck. Now, you'll also notice here it says, drag cards here to mulch, 100 of one species equals 1 EX chip. Now, EX chips are, well, the idea is that it will be a little badge that can then be placed on a card of that species. So if you've mulched 100 magpies, you will have an EX chip that can then be applied to one of your magpie cards. Now, what that EX chip does, I haven't decided yet. The obvious one is a bit of a stats boost. Also, it can be a bit of a, I think it would be cool to do something where when an EX chip's put on a card, it gets a different border that's more ornate, and we go a little bit like in the Pokemon cards, how you get like the V Max cards and things like that. You just go for a crazy version of that card. So it's like, I've leveled up the Eurasian magpie to the point where I've EX'd that bad boy. As I say, like all digital things, there's no inherent value to them, but number goes up, rarity is a thing. It just feels like you maybe this meta layer on top of the Birdydex. It's just something to interact with. Now, what are the stats for? Other than amusing me, I haven't decided yet. What we do then have, you will notice, is this other section here called battle. The concept here is you're leveling up your cards, you're feeding cards to cards, you're getting EXs, you're getting EX chips, you're getting random drops of crows and other birds that happen to be shinies in ultra rare that have extra stats. Well, it would be cool if you could then take those cards and put them into a hand. So that is what the battles page does. And you're taking any 5 of your card, any 5 cards that you have in your collection, and you're essentially making a team with them. Now, what this does, I haven't decided yet. I'm building it as a go. I have ideas. but I would love to hear ideas as well. So these 5 cards are just random 5 cards I picked, but they are what's making up the team that I've picked from the birds that have been heard in my garden. And all of their stats together equal 1,868 total power. And these are the stats for every one of the 7 base stats combined. So this does give us some sort of statistical thing that can be used in some way. I think it would be really cool if you could take these and you could upload them to just like a central like site that would just every day pair a hand against another random hand and battle. That battle would be maths. I don't think I would be within my ability to be building an actual card game around this, but some sort of randomly assigned top trump type thing that could just be computed off. You know, doesn't have to be live. And then you could check back in to see like, oh, my hand has won yesterday's battle, right? And then over time there would be stats associated with how many battles your hand has won. I don't know why I'm doing this, other than the fact that I said earlier that ideas are free, but taking ideas too far is a talent. I think that would be cool. I would love to hear some ideas for ways that you could implement the battling. How could this hand of cards that you can work on and you can level up and you can show off how stupidly lucky your draws have been, etc. These hands would reflect your garden, you know, the type of things that you hear where you are. It'd be good to have ways of showing this off. It could be simple things like images. What I'm thinking of there is old school forum signatures, you know, where people would have a banner that they'd done in Photoshop, which would be their signature at the bottom of forum posts. But obviously, that's just not a thing anymore. I think this is such a stupid idea. I'm pretty pleased with what it brings to Birdydex in terms of just another layer of reason to check back in on it. And it would be really cool if multiple people did have this installed and you could actually have a hand that like effectively fought against others, even if it's more of a asynchronous offline type of thing where you're not actually battling yourself, just because I think that's out of scope for the type of thing I could build and deploy. So only thing I'll say is all of that is hidden behind the EX button. Gone. If you don't care, you never have to interact with it. Press this button, this nonsense appears. None of it interferes with anything else. So my stupid idea does not have to fundamentally influence and have an impact on you if you just wanted to use this as a tracker, a logger, calendar with statistics, which is great. And I think ultimately this is why I built this. So this is what I actually wanted. But as soon as I started going down the Birdydex idea and the Pokédex type thing, then my brain went, oh yeah, cards. God, wouldn't it be cool if each call was actually a card? And then this is how we ended up where we are. So that is just my little update, my little check-in on the state of Birdydex. Obviously, this is the software side of things, but there is the hardware element of this, which is the audio recorder. I have to design a printed circuit board. This is keycard, and this is the first time I've ever used keycard. And to say that I hate keycard would be an understatement. This is where the solar panel 2 wires get screwed in. It's as easy as it can be.